You're listening to Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Hi.
Hello.
Happy belated birthday to Rachel. One day late.
Thanks.
We're recording this before your birthday, but when it comes out, your birthday will be over. You don't think about it for a whole nother year.
This is the best day of the year. The day after your birthday. Now I don't have to worry about turning another year older for a whole year. It's great. It's all a downhill slide from here. The inexorable crawl toward death.
It always makes me laugh how much
Type
you
4
hate birthdays.
It's not that I hate birthdays. It's that I want to live a vampire's lifespan and I can't, you know, or a fae's lifespan. I've read a lot of Sarah J. Maas this year, like all of Court of Thorn and Roses, Throne of Glass, and reading Crescent City right now. And I'm like, all these like 25-year-old women are ending up with 500-year-old men. And I'm like, that is exactly right. That is the age gap that I require. Like at that point, they've really learned a thing or two.
475-year gap.
You know, they've learned a thing or two. You know what? I'll take a 300 or 200-year-old. Sometimes she throws them with a young buck who's only like 230.
But I'm imagining they probably reach a certain level of physicality and then stop aging.
They stop at like 28. It's perfect. I would take up to like 38 or 40. I don't mind, like, you know. But no, they always like stop aging around like 30.
Of course.
Yeah. And so they're just beautiful for 500 plus years. And I'm just like, that's what I'm looking for. So, you know,
realistic dreams here.
Speaking of, yeah, people might want to, do they care what I did on my birthday yesterday? I don't know yet because it hasn't happened at the time that we were recording this, but the plan is that Kristen and I are going to go out to lunch and then we're going to kill some time at Barnes & Noble, which is not killing time.
No, that is spending
the best time,
the most valuable use of time.
Then we're going to go see Thor: Love and Thunder. Speaking of godlike men who live forever.
Let's keep going with the theme here.
Let's go with the theme. Because I really want to see it and I have not had an opportunity yet. So Kristen doesn't mind seeing naked Chris Hemsworth.
Who does?
I would like to meet the person. Even the straight men are like, yeah,
I get it.
Like I get it. I would too. And then we're gonna have dinner with another friend. That's the plan. If all goes according to plan, that will be the plan. I don't know what I'll do in the morning. Scarlett will be with my dad, so I could do whatever I want.
Whatever you please. Again, that's why I love birthdays.
I know.
Whatever you want.
I don't know. I'll figure that. I'll probably just go on a walk or something because I'll be sitting a lot. I'll probably just go on a walk.
Eating a lot and sitting a lot.
Yeah.
Birthdays are for good food, if you ask me. That's like the
100%.
main requirement of a birthday.
That I can get down with. But, you know, you and I eat a lot of good food all the time. Like, it's not like we deprive ourselves until it's our birthdays. And then we're like, ooh, special treat. It's just like, ooh.
Just keep eating good food.
It's Thursday. Let's have some pie. Like, that's kind of how it goes. Anyway. Okay. Well, yep.
Okay,
it was,
so
I'm assuming it was a good day.
Wish Rachel happy birthday.
Oh,
even belated.
The best.
I'll take it.
The best thing.
Happy day after birthday.
Sure.
Her favorite day
Post
of the year.
birthday. Belated birthdays are, yeah, okay, that's fine. But if they want to actually give me something for my birthday, I would appreciate a rating and a review, either on this podcast or Forever Alone.
Or how about both?
Well, yeah.
Not either or.
Darn tootin'.
Happy birthday.
That might be the only time this year I've said that.
You can ask for what you really want.
Ratings and reviews. Attention. Validation.
Praise and love.
Praise, love. I'm a Leo. Like, don't like don't sleep on us. We'll take all of the attention you want to give us and then some. We love it. But only if it's good attention. I mean,
don't leave a 1-star rating, please.
Absolutely not. I'll delete it.
If you
I don't know if
a
I can.
1-star rating, can you maybe just not listen?
Just stop listening to this podcast.
If you don't like us that much, just
don't listen.
There's a lot of podcasts out there. You don't need to keep hating. But we'll take a 5 any day.
Out of 5.
Out of 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we're talking about men, absolutely will not.
Because then we're usually out of 10.
Yeah. Nope. I'm not taking that. That's a hard pass.
That's a fail. It's
He's only lived 100 years past. He's 5.
Oh no.
Okay. Well,
so we're doing a side chat.
We sort of struggle to figure out what are we going to talk about today. Sometimes the subject comes about very naturally. Sometimes we have to rack our brains to figure out what have we been coaching around lately, or what's been coming up for us lately that we think needs talking about. And it did occur to me as we were eating lunch that there is a sort of theme that I'm seeing coming up with some of my clients that maybe we should talk about. And we got a question along these lines 6+ months ago on a Dear Rachel. So I'll link to that episode because we did kind of speak to this already. But again, what is this podcast if not speaking about the same things from a slightly different angle over and over and over again? And you keep listening. So it's your fault if if you don't like it.
A slightly different angle.
It does
just
help.
It's different. Or sometimes hearing the same thing for this 12th time.
It finally works.
Finally sinks in.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
we try to bring a fresh take on it if we can.
Okay. So the theme that I've seen coming up is that I've got a number of people who feel like they're stuck, but what they feel stuck by is more so their circumstance. It's not completely and utterly that they don't know what they want. They have an idea of what they want or where they might be going, but they don't feel like they can bridge the gap. They don't know how to bridge the gap between where they're at and ultimately where they want to be. Like there's a lot of steps in between. So like, for example, I have one who, I hate this, but she's having to move because her rent has been hiked up, which is a lot of people are experiencing that. I've had friends telling me about that lately. It's just,
housing costs in general.
It's just freaking ridiculous. But
the cost of everything is just crazy, but that's a whole other tangent we won't go down right now.
The rent is too damn high. Do you remember that man who was like crazy? I don't know if he was actually crazy, but he ran for office and his platform was the rent is too damn high.
Oh, I think I do remember that.
He was not wrong.
It's only getting
worse. I don't know. Anyway, so she's going to have to move and she doesn't really want to move, but it's not feasible for her to stay. And I've got someone else who is like, I need a big change. I'm in a rut and there's all these things I could do and I don't know what to do and I don't know how to get out of this rut. So maybe this is a conversation about one way that you could potentially get out of a rut, which is, and I'm going to then back up what I'm saying with explanation, which is consider doing something crazy.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this because we talk a lot about making small changes, sometimes really small changes, sometimes baby steps.
We had a side chat a couple months ago about like how to sort of incrementally get out of your comfort zone.
And I'm usually a pretty big fan of taking the small incremental steps toward
change,
whatever you want,
especially if it's like inner work, right? Like if you're trying to get over people pleasing or you're trying to work through something you're really afraid of, doing a big swing doesn't really work because it's too scary. You'll shut down. It'll trigger all of your fear and your shame and like your inner critic. It doesn't really work.
Yeah. It's a really good strategy when you're completely overwhelmed and considering taking a big step, even considering taking a medium-sized step feels way too big and you end up doing nothing.
Right.
And so a lot of times I think it is helpful to find what's the smallest thing I can do just to get the momentum going. But that's not always true. That's not always the answer. If you really think about how change happens, and I think every single one of us could look back on our own lives and see, yeah, this is pretty much how all change has happened in my life. Mostly it's little things that built up over time. And then you look back and say, oh, wow, I'm really different, or my situation's really different, even though there wasn't one big moment. It was just these small little moments that all added up to a big change gradually. But sometimes there are moments when you have to make a decision, or you have to consider something that feels a little bit crazy, or you have to just shake it up. And change can happen pretty abruptly.
Yeah.
Now, those are more rare, but they are sometimes what's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've been feeling more, like Rachel said, in a rut, kind of stuck, kind of trapped
in a routine that just you can't get out of, and maybe you've done some inner work already. You've
tried to make some minor changes, or you've
been coached.
Yeah.
I mean, hey,
yeah,
I'm talking about people I've currently worked with or working with.
Sometimes what you might need in that situation is to not do the baby step, but to look at what's something that
is a big swing,
feels kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That might really shake up things, but maybe that's what I need right now.
Right. Like, okay. I had one of my clients make a list after I told her, okay, maybe can we just think about doing something nuts? I want you to just indulge me and go off and create a list of every crazy thing that you can think that you could possibly do. And I don't mean like literally out of the realm of complete and utter possibility, would never do it. And she came back with some things that I thought were really brilliant. And then she came back with some things that were really funny too. Like one was join a convent. And I was like, you know what? Sure.
You could do that.
She was like, join a commune. And she Googled it and she was like, it was a cult. She's like, you had to give them your life savings. I'm like, that's a cult. I'm like, that's a cult.
I have yet to hear about a really like healthy commune where it doesn't end up turning into a cult.
Right.
But, maybe they're out there.
Keep looking.
I watched way too many of those like Netflix specials.
Wild Country. Oh my gosh.
Podcast series about cults.
We love it.
I'm suspicious, but you still could. You could do it.
You could
join a cult if you
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. I am not saying do that.
Please don't.
One of her other ideas that I loved was adopt a new persona and live as her. I had to give her so much credit for creativity and making me laugh because
you could do that.
Right. And then she had ones that were like, get a makeover. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Move, like sublet my place and move to a new city to be closer to one of my family members. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Like, okay. So there was like things that normally were some things that sounded actually like ridiculous. And she knew they were ridiculous.
Clients who are looking at, or maybe are considering, or maybe have already done some big changes like that. Like, what if I did just take a sabbatical? That seems crazy. I've heard people do that, but I couldn't do that. But what if I did?
But it's not crazy because literally 30% of the people I work with end up taking a sabbatical. I mean,
who never would have believed
they could.
That they could.
No.
I have another client who's very seriously considering upping and moving to another country, at least for a little while.
Absolutely. I just had
living a year in abroad somewhere.
I have multiple people do that. Mm-hmm. I have someone doing that right now. I have someone who just got back. I have someone who I've been working with off and on for 7 years, who I just love. Shout out to you. If you're listening, you know, you are, who realized that like, I am not my best self unless I get to sort of split my time between here and abroad. And so she found a way to kind of leave the country for 3 to 4 months at a time. And she like does like one of those like kind of like remote working, you know, cohorts. So she's not doing it by herself. There's other people that she's traveling with, and she's staying in a place for 3 weeks or 4 weeks at a time. And then she's going somewhere else. And it's usually within the same country, I think, or the same general region. But like, she's been to Europe, she's been to South America. I mean, she's been all over. And then she comes back for like 3 or 4 months and then she leaves again. And that, some of you are thinking, sounds, you could never do that. But I'm like, but she would have told you that she could have never done that. And she's doing that. So the reason we want to shine a light on the value of thinking crazy or thinking crazier than you normally would is that sometimes ideas about how to get out of a rut don't occur to you until you let yourself almost go past the point of sanity and reason. And then sometimes you can you end up maybe not going for the craziest idea you have, like adopting a new persona, right? Maybe not that, but you end up being able to consider, because you all of a sudden have way more of a spectrum of things you're considering. You might be able to consider something further along from where you are now that you wouldn't have considered if you'd not let yourself go there.
Mm-hmm. That is maybe the point I want to emphasize the most about this is I'm not even saying you have to do anything crazy.
No.
Just the act of letting your mind really explore what are all the things I could do here. That in and of itself, just the mental exercise of that is incredibly freeing. If you've been feeling trapped or stuck or in a rut, then imagining a whole new life or a whole new career or a whole new location can make you feel like I don't have to be stuck here.
No, this is a choice.
This is a choice.
It makes you realize that you're not actually stuck. There are a lot of things you are choosing to do, and acknowledging your other choices forces you to come to terms with the fact that everything you do is mostly a choice.
It might even help to read stories about or seek out other people's stories or examples of them making a big crazy change.
Why did people love Eat, Pray, Love so much?
Right.
Because it was crazy
to live vicariously through her big crazy life choice where she just kind of threw everything up in the air and said, I don't know, but we're going to shake it all up. So reading those stories or seeking out those examples might help your brain realize you really could do this. You could do any of these things. And the belief that something crazy is possible for you and not just for Liz Gilbert, right? People like that.
Privileged people, potentially, they're going to be thinking, I'm going to speak to that, to the money concerns and to the stuff that the inner critic is going to say as soon as you start considering it. We'll talk about that, obviously.
Sure. But the more you start to believe, maybe I could.
Or it is possible.
It is possible. I could choose.
Factually, it is something I could do. I'm an
adult human. I don't have to do anything that I don't choose to do. Unless someone has a gun to my head, I don't have to do anything.
Well, even then, you don't have to.
Even then, you don't have to.
You can choose to just let them shoot you and see what happens. I mean, I'm not saying I advise that either.
Right.
But
none of us are under 18 anymore, right? We don't have to get parental consent.
If you are under 18, I'm sorry.
That's true. You might have to get parental consent for some things.
Yeah. And if you're under 21, there's some things you can't do.
Legally, there might be some limitations.
There's still things you can't do over 21. You can't kill somebody, but why do you need to do that?
Never.
You don't need to do that.
Attacking you.
This comes up far too often on this podcast. What does that mean about our psyches?
It means I read a lot. I actually listen to a lot of murder mystery.
You gotta listen to a lot of those a lot of those girly chick lit, Reese Witherspoon summer book club picks books. You do that. You do your the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window, which was a fun show, by the way.
I've really been on a British murder mystery.
Well, same deal.
Yeah, for sure. My mind tends to go there. Also, I love scam podcasts. That's another thing I've been getting into lately.
Oh, well, then off air, I'm going to give you a recommendation of what you should be listening to.
I might already be, but we'll see.
I doubt it.
So that's a side note. So you could run a whole scam. Right.
Well, that's a choice. You could con. You could be a con person. Become a con person. I guess.
Anyway, we're not advocating for illegal activity here.
No.
But I do. The reason we're kind of going off
think about it. Listen, ain't nobody going to arrest you for thinking about illegal things.
No,
because maybe that opens your mind to something you could do that's perfectly legal.
Or who's the character in Kimmy Schmidt who decides she wants to become her own lady cult leader.
Oh, yeah. Gretchen.
Yeah. Now she actually does it, which I don't recommend. But, you know, just thinking like, what are some crazy things I could do? Might, first of all, make you feel a little bit less trapped and a little bit less serious.
Yeah.
Because your mind has to get creative and a little bit crazy and silly to go to those extremes. And there's value in that imagination and creativity. But then, like Rachel said, sometimes what happens is that thought exercise might land you on something that is somewhere in between the status quo and the craziest thing. But if you had started with, oh my gosh, I could move to a different apartment, that might have felt too crazy. But when you start with, I could move overseas and become a cult leader or scam artist, or I could just move to an apartment down the street. Like, that's actually not so crazy, right? So in comparison, it might make some other more reasonable changes feel more accessible. But sometimes also you realize I'm actively choosing this for a reason.
Yeah.
And then even if you don't change a single thing about your circumstances, having considered alternatives and saying, I still would rather be here is freeing. Because now you're choosing to be here. You're not stuck here.
Exactly. Right. We've both done this.
I just did this year.
Go ahead. Tell them about it.
I won't get too much into the weeds, but if you can imagine, if you have done any job for a decade, you're going to have moments when you're like, is this what I want to keep doing? And Rachel and I have had those moments, sometimes simultaneously, without even knowing it sometimes until later on. We're like, oh, you were thinking that? I was thinking that. And that's kind of what happened.
Earlier this year, like December, January.
Yeah. Yeah. We were having a like parallel Rachel moment where we were like,
kind of like,
is this what I want to keep doing? And I had to let myself get a little bit crazy in my thought. I'm like, I would be in the shower and I'd be like, what would happen if I didn't coach? If I didn't have a business? If Clarity on Fire just like didn't exist anymore, what would I do? I never really let myself really go there. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I become a equine therapist. Maybe I train service dogs for veterans. Maybe I don't know. I was just thinking of crazy stuff. Maybe I go to school and become a therapist like I've talked about before.
Girl, I'm writing a fantasy novel series. I'm going to write about those men. I'm going to write about magic. It's going to become a Netflix series. I'm going to make a lot of money.
Yeah. I'm like, what if I was a landlord? What if I just owned properties and leased them out to people? I don't know.
You were literally like in Texas and you're like, you don't live in Texas?
I just knew that Austin was like,
the real estate market was hot there.
It was hot there.
Okay, well, good luck buying something.
I think that was probably true several years ago. I think I'm way past the curve there. There's probably other locales that are now the up and coming place. I don't know enough about this. I'd have to learn a lot. But yeah, that's a thing I could do. I could do any of those things. What ended up happening, the more I was letting my brain just wander, I'm like, I would miss coaching. I like coaching. That's not the problem. The problem isn't coaching. So, okay, what do I want? Why is my mind wandering? And that got Rachel and I starting to think about, okay, well, we like coaching. Are there other ways to be business owners? And what would have felt like crazy changes previously, things that we've been doing in business that at some point I'm sure we'll get into all of that. We're kind of still in the thick of it. Didn't seem so crazy because I'm like, well, I still have a business. I'm still a coach. Most of what I'm doing is very similar. We're just going to changing the structure a little bit or changing the processes a little bit or bringing people on to help in ways that we hadn't before. And like, that's way more reasonable than
hiring a virtual assistant is like less crazy than quitting your job to become an equine therapist.
Right. Like, oh, that's no big deal.
Yeah.
That's no big deal. So it ended up with us not having to make that many changes in the grand scheme of things. But I don't think I would have gotten there if I hadn't considered all the other possibilities and realized I'm I continue to pick coaching for a good reason. So yeah, like, get a little crazy. I'm not asking you to do all of those things. I'm not asking you to quit your job today and go pursue something that you had a fleeting thought about, but give that fleeting thought a little bit more energy. Like,
when I
follow it down the rabbit hole.
When I was in the UK last fall with my friend Marissa, we were on a tour, and our tour guide, who I think she was British, but she was telling but she lived in Edinburgh for like 17 years or something. So she was basically Scottish now, even though the Scots would never accept that. And she was like, she was telling us about this potential new program to help increase Scotland's population, because it's a small population. They want to encourage more people to move there or something. And so they were going to do this like 3 to 4 year program where you can come, and then after, I don't know, you have to meet certain requirements or whatever, but then you can like be on a path to like citizenship. And Marissa and I looked at each other like
wide-eyed.
Could we though? Like move here and become Scottish citizens? It's a possibility. It's a thing I could do.
People immigrate to other countries all the time.
Yeah, I could do that. Mm-hmm. I could also just go work from there or anywhere for 4 months. I could go live with my brother who currently lives in Romania. Mm-hmm. And I could
get a work visa.
I don't need a work visa. I could be on a tourist visa for 3 or 4 months and stay with him and like work from Romania. I could do that. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, now, I could come up with more crazy things that I could do. Those are just a couple of random things that I could do. And they're not even that crazy in the grand scheme of things. Like I could probably think of crazier, like join the circus. And I can't even do a cartwheel. But I don't think Cirque du Soleil would be hiring me anytime soon.
You could try out for the circus.
I'm way too old. They have like an old lady act that I could probably do.
What would you do?
I don't know.
I would just like ride the elephants.
That reminds me of the fact that
athletic for that.
One time my aunt I wasn't there for this, but one time my aunt, you know which one I'm talking about, got really smashed and tripped down her hill, like where in the back of her house. She was having a pool party in the back of her, out back. And she rolled down the hill and her teeth flew out because she has false teeth.
Nothing could be more in character for her.
Isn't that? Like, you can see it. It's completely
I feel like I was there. I can imagine it so well.
It's a favorite visual
of my favorite of your family member.
She's hard to top. Anyway, so like that would be the old lady act that I would imagine that's where that came from.
What a tangent. Okay. Yeah, you could do that.
I could become an old lady act at the freaking circus if I wanted to. I could go back to law school or something. Back to law school, as if I ever
did. You start?
I didn't start it, but I could go to law school. That sounds awful. I don't want to do that. Like, guys, just what if we challenged you to write down at least 10? And I actually think that's not enough. I think sometimes when you have to force yourself to do more, you have to get like kind of progressively more wild or insane or crazier. Mm-hmm. So more than 10, like 20 would challenge your brain more. But I would love for you to actually pause, or at the end of this podcast. I know you're not going to, most of you aren't going to do it, and that's fine. But you could actually pause and write down your not so crazy, but kind of crazy ideas about things that you could change, things that you could just shake up. It's like taking the cards that you've been playing with and tossing them up in the air, just completely flipping the table over.
Or if you're driving or taking your dog for a walk or washing dishes or doing something where you can't just stop and pause and make a list, just give yourself a few minutes to think about, let your mind wander before you move on to the next podcast or before you move on to the next task of your day. Because that's where imagination really flourishes, is when you don't give it something else to chew on right away.
Yeah. And
after this, I would love to just let your mind go wherever it's going to go and be like, all right, mind, go as crazy as you want. No. Just like we remove the training wheels or whatever you want to call it. Go wild. happens. See what happens. You might laugh at yourself at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
But you might come up with some ideas that you're like, I don't know about that.
This is why people dye their hair after they have a breakup.
Oh, sure.
Because when you change something big, you do change. It's like you become a slightly different version of yourself. And that's why we do that after a breakup, is because, and I've done that. I've literally cut my hair and dyed my hair after a breakup. Like, I am a cliche. I have definitely done this. And it's because it's a really good punctuation mark to be like, that was then, this is now. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you want something to change, obviously I'm mostly an advocate for inner work. Like, do the inner work first. Don't just like try to change something on the outside. Don't just move to a new city and think, I'm going to be a new person just because I live in a new city. I'm not that naive, and you shouldn't be either. However, I also know that sometimes if you're really stuck in a rut and you have done some of that inner work, mm-hmm. sometimes the best way to make a change is to just force things to be different and see, okay, well, who am I with? Like, who am I in a different city? Because it might change your attitude. It might change your perspective on life. Absolutely, it will. Like, nothing changes if nothing changes. So if nothing is changing, then you can force a change and see what happens. And I'm not saying you're always going to like what you get, right? Like, when you roll the dice, you may or may not win, but you're going to have a different experience than you're having now. So if there is pain in having the same experience over and over and over again, and any change feels like a relief, you are allowed to just be a little crazy and do something different and shake things up.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know some of your brains are going to logistics.
Right. But I don't have the money to do that. And like all of the normal things that are going to come up, like the but here's why you can't do that. That's a normal reaction, by the way. Everyone's going to be doing that. And
the reality is, everything we just gave examples for, or everything you could come up with, it's going to have some consequences, good and bad. And so, yeah, you could say, maybe I am going to become a scam artist, but you know what? There are going to be some repercussions to that.
Unless you're really good.
I mean, yeah, you have to be like one of the best.
Like, don't try to start the fire festival, you know?
Oh, no. No, unless your goal is to have a documentary made about how terrible you're
while you're in prison. No, he's not in prison anymore, I don't think.
He's already out.
Oh, yeah, and he's scamming. And, you know, he's doing it.
Tiger doesn't change his stripes.
No.
So, yes, it might cost more money to do that. Or if you decide, I'm just going to up and quit my job. Yeah, you're going to have to figure out how to pay the bills for a little while, or you're going to have to dip into your savings, or there will be consequences to your actions. The question to ask is, are the consequences worth because there's consequences of staying too. The consequences of staying, you already know, and it's reflected in how you're feeling. So sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm willing to spend a little bit of money for a completely different emotional experience than what I'm having right now, or to grow in this new, scary, challenging, exciting way. Or I'm willing to have a little bit of uncertainty on this front of where am I going to live after I come back from my trip abroad, in order to have the experience of not having the status quo go into infinity. Mm-hmm. Being an adult means that you have the ability to choose pretty much whatever you want. But there will be
cause and effect
of your choices.
Always.
There's also cause and effect of staying. So that's what you have to weigh. Uh-huh. Am I so tired of feeling stuck and feeling trapped and feeling like this is interminable that I am willing to maybe go through a different kind of discomfort in the name of some bigger benefit?
And let me tell you this, if you don't, life is still going to throw you things regardless. Like, your house is going to flood and you're going to end up living with your parents for 5 months, just, as an example. Mm-hmm. But in doing that, it actually sent me down paths I might not have explored that were very transformative otherwise. Like that stuff I talked about last week, I just pointed behind me as if I'm referring to the past, right? It's funny because that episode is coming out in the future as we're talking right now.
Trippy.
But anyway, all that dating stuff I talked to you guys about, I'm not sure that really would have happened had I not ended up living with my parents for 5 months. Life is like water running through, a canyon or something. It erodes it. It will reshape the landscape over time. So you can't help but be different when your life circumstances change. Mm-hmm. And you can choose to change them as opposed to allow them to change.
Don't worry. At some point, life will change them for you. But you can decide to change them on your terms ahead of time if you want to.
Or you can use a life circumstance that's outside your control, like your rent going up and being forced to move, as your kind of catalyst for doing something maybe outside the norm or crazy, quote unquote crazy.
Yeah.
So you're always going to have to deal with cause and effect. But
there's a cause and effect here or in that alternate reality.
And I would also caution you against assuming that you ever really know what the cause and effect means. Like or
that you're even right about it.
That's what I'm saying. So I have a normal person interview coming out next month where, and I'm not going to give away the whole thing, but she lived in California and she made a crazy choice, quote unquote, to relocate for work to Chicago. And it was a kind of a disaster. And she ended up moving back home and living with her parents or, her mom in California. And, then she's like shut up in her room all day, like depressed that she made this huge leap and it didn't work out. But of course that set her on a path to where she is now, where she, and I quote, is like, I've never been happier in my whole life. So how do you know that even when something goes bad, that it means it went wrong?
Right.
Going bad and it being wrong are two different things. Like it can feel bad and it still be actually going right.
That reminds me of our episode with Kristen Kalp, where she moved to Oregon. And it went very bad.
Yeah.
And at the end, she still said, I wouldn't change a thing.
I'll link to that. I think that was from May of 2021, something like that. We've had her on the podcast twice, but I think it was last spring. Time. Yeah, I'll link to it.
Yeah. Great example of I'm just going to change up everything. And it did not go.
And it was terrible. And she wouldn't change anything.
And she still doesn't regret any of it.
Yeah.
And learned a ton.
She moved across the country only to end up living a block away from where she did before she moved. She was like the longest roundabout move of my entire life, but wouldn't change it. Mm-hmm. So
good example. So if you are currently feeling really overwhelmed, really terrified of some of the things that you want, this may not be the right time for you to be jumping into crazy thinking.
I wouldn't make any choices while you're freaked out and panicked. I would definitely.
And maybe even thinking about that is going to be just way too much.
If it makes you feel super anxious, then you don't have to. If it feels like a relief to allow yourself to brainstorm interesting ideas, crazy ideas, out of the box ideas, whatever you want to call them, do it. If it feels like a relief and it feels fun and maybe
like a little scary, but like kind of exciting at the same time,
right?
Like that little bit of nervous excitement energy.
Yeah.
Then that means that there's value in you doing that thought exercise. If you're like, I can barely get through today, I can't even consider making a giant life change. Okay. Maybe you need the baby steps.
Maybe you do. Yeah.
And that's fine. But keep this in mind because we all go through phases and ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Where sometimes we're really, really overwhelmed. We have to rein ourselves back in and just say, what's the smallest thing I can do to make a change? And sometimes we're just stagnant and in a lull and we need something to respark some energy or to ignite our lives in some way for us to feel re-engaged. And for you, this might be exactly what you need right now.
Oh, I have more ideas. I'm like, go on a 7-day silent retreat.
I have thought about that.
Oh, wouldn't that be so nice?
Even like 3 days I would take.
Go on like a writing retreat or something. Just go on a retreat and not have to work. That's called a vacation.
Take a vacation.
That
might feel crazy to you right now.
Literally, it kind of does. Kind of does. Yeah. Like, I don't know. Oh, become someone who works at the Renaissance Fair.
Sure. Very specific.
I know. I've never been to one either, but I think that's really a missed opportunity. Of all people, why have I not been to a Ren fair?
You could join the Peace Corps.
Yeah, that's a thing. I mean, I would never, but for some people, that's a great idea.
You could learn a new language.
That's not that crazy. But
what if you will go to the country and learn the language?
Oh,
there you go.
Go to an immersion school.
Sure.
In Italy, like Liz Gilbert did.
Oh, that's the dream.
Eat my weight in pasta.
That's definitely a dream.
I mean, go to a convention, like a Harry Potter convention or a Star Wars convention, or I don't know. Go to a convention where there's bound to be a lot of hot people and pretend that you're a participant and hit on people. Not creepily, just to find a husband.
I was just in North Carolina because I was on vacation. We stopped in North Carolina on the way down to South Carolina and stopped in this barbecue restaurant for lunch. And half of the people there were dressed in some wild costumes. And I was like, what is happening here? And we asked around and they were having Comic-Con. I don't know if it's always in North Carolina or if it just was this year.
It travels around.
But
well, then there's local Comic-Cons too.
Oh, sure.
There's a national.
So there you go. People were having a blast. They were all dressed up.
That'd be fun. I'd love to do that.
Sure. So yeah, what's something that the kid version of you would have loved to do?
Yeah.
And maybe you want to take horseback riding lessons. Maybe you want to become a pilot. Maybe you want to learn how to scuba dive. Okay. You're an adult. You can pick those things now.
Right. You could go visit a friend you've been meaning to visit for 3 years in their city. Go to their city. Just do it. I mean,
we just want your brain to start
opening up. Yeah.
To possibilities that you would have been like, no, that's crazy.
So
thought of that.
If I were to give you additional homework beyond just the list, is then, and this is a thought exercise. I'm not asking you to actually follow through on it necessarily, but pick something and then plan it out. Okay, I am going to go live in Scotland for 3 months and I'm going to work from there. Okay. I'm going to find an Airbnb that I can quote unquote afford or whatever, right? This is where I would live.
What site would I use to sublet out my
place?
My current place?
Or my lease is up anyway. So I'm just going to put my stuff in storage and I'll look at storage units and then I'll come back and figure out where to live after that. Something like that. Right. Or here's where, you can get really granular. Here's some of the weekend trips I would take while I lived there. Here's where I would co-work with other people who are maybe doing remote work from there.
Here's where I'd park my car for 3 months.
Here's where I have a grocery shop.
Right.
Right.
Look at flights. What are the flights to and from?
Right.
Just make it more real. Make it feel more real. I have people do this when they're considering moving to a new city. Do a virtual visit. Even if you can't at this moment afford to physically go to that city, go on Google Maps and drill down into different neighborhoods. Where would I shop? Where would I go to the gym? Where would I want to live? Look at real estate prices. Look at meetup groups. What groups would I join? Who would I want to hang out with? You can start to imagine a different life without having to do a single thing, except let your brain wander and do a little bit of scrolling and clicking on your computer.
One of my ideas has always been to go stay in Maine for a period of time and get on Bumble while there for lumberjacks.
Sure.
That's a great. Sure. Honestly, I could do that now and then pretend that I'm staying in Maine. And then if I meet someone really hot, I could just kind of fly up there and go on a date. And he doesn't have to know that I'm not there. Hashtag con artist.
See, you could be a Bumble con artist.
I could. Whatever. I would be willing to relocate.
Sure. So it's not totally a con.
No. It's a cute story when you're getting married. And if you don't end up getting married, it's a funny story they tell other people on a
about
first
that
date.
Crazy girl I met.
Who I realized lied about not being in Maine. Whatever. Think outside the box.
You have a lot more options than you let yourself consider. And that's what we want you to take away from this.
Yeah.
It's let's just imagine.
You're just you're not as stuck as you have convinced yourself you are, because you are a person who is an adult with modicum, if not more, of autonomy and free will.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't be up here being like, I don't know what to do. I can't do anything different. I'm like, no, you can. You just don't know what to do. And you often think you're going to get it wrong. So you default to choosing nothing. But sometimes if you believe you can't get it wrong and that so many paths can lead you where you're going to go and you're not going to miss what's meant for you, then you can feel free to make a decision like that and just let life take you where it may.
Can we ask people to give us their crazy ideas?
I would love to hear them.
That would be so fun for me. Please leave a comment on this episode. We'll link to it in the show notes where you can find it on our blog. And I want to hear, what do you come up with?
Yeah, what's your version of a crazy idea?
Mm-hmm. You might give other people some ideas too.
I hope we did today. I hope that some of these ideas landed and that we do not get roped into some sort of like legal entanglement because we ask people to become con artists or something.
It's true. I'm sorry. If the FBI is listening, I'm so sorry. We're not giving anyone, we're not advising anyone.
Depends on how hot the FBI agent is if he's listening. Hit me up.
You're like, you can investigate me.
Ooh, just some light criminality to snag a man. It's a new idea. Add it to the list.
It's a new idea. Oh my.
Okay. Well, if nothing else, I hope you laughed because I did.
I sure did. This was fun. And let us know what your crazy ideas are. And we'll be back next week with, I think, a message from the universe.
Yeah, maybe you come up with your crazy idea and then the universe will comment on it next week.
Yeah, we'll see if you get a validation or if you get a, maybe don't do the scam artist thing quite yet.
Wait till the fall. It'll be better for cons then. Okay, bye.
Bye.